Hello, church. I'm Judy Nelson. I co-teach a women's class here at the church with Judy Randall. And the last time we were in Sunday school together, my class was doing a study on Gideon. We were right to the last lesson when we were called to come home and stay. And so anyway, when Dick asked me if I would teach a Sunday school class, my first thought was to finish what we had begun. Gideon was one of many leaders in the Bible who did not finish well. Even though he made it into the Hall of Fame in Hebrews 11, he still didn't finish well. By God's power and grace, weak and timid Gideon was transformed into a mighty warrior, and the Lord used him to defeat the Midianites, their enemies at that time, and to give peace to Israel over 40 years. And yet, Gideon did not finish well. Gideon's story begins with the Israelites and them not obeying God. They were not perfect, and they continued to wander away from God. In fact, Judges tells us in chapter 21 that everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. Does that sound familiar to us? So because of their sin, God gave them into the hands of Midian for 7 years. And the power of Midian was so oppressive. The people were so afraid that they sought shelter in the mountains and in mountain cliffs and caves, anywhere they could hide from this oppression. And whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midians would come into them in droves, many thousands of them, ravishing their land, ruining their crops, saving nothing for Israel. And they even killed their sheep, their donkeys, their cows. They became so impoverished that they called out to God for help. And he answered them by sending them a prophet who reminded them that God had brought them out of bondage from the Egyptians, and he had brought them to a new land. And when they got there, he told them, don't worship the other gods from the people around you. But they did not listen. So during this time, an angel of the Lord came and sat down under an oak tree in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress. Normally the people threshed their wheat outside, and usually on a hill, because they could separate the wheat from the chaff. But because of Gideon's fear of the enemy, he had to hide in a hole, literally in the ground, to thresh wheat and save it for his family. The angel says to Gideon, the Lord is with you, mighty warrior. Can you imagine somebody hiding in a hole in the ground and God addresses you as a mighty warrior? Gideon tells the angel, well, if he's with us, why has all this happened to us? The Lord brought us out of Egypt, but now he's abandoned us and give us over to the Midianites. The Lord turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Gideon says, pardon me, Lord. How can I save Israel? My clan's the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family. Does this sound familiar? Do we remember Moses when he had excuses to God that, I can't speak, I can't do this, Lord. Who am I? Anyway, the Lord answered Gideon, I'll be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alone. Well, Gideon's not real sure that this about this angel. Is he from God? So he asked him to give him a sign, and he says, wait here till I return. And the angel agrees. So Gideon runs to his house. He prepares some meat, some bread, and some broth, and he comes back and gives it to the angel. He tells him, put it on this rock. Put the bread and the meat on the rock, and then pour the broth over it. And so Gideon does what the angel asked. And the angel takes the tip of his staff and touches the food, and fire consumes it. Wow. Gideon is convinced, and he builds an altar right there to the Lord. The angel then gives Gideon his commission. He says, first thing I want you to do is go home and clean house. That's what we need to start with, isn't it, with ourselves? He said, I want you to go home to your father's house, and I want you to destroy the altar of Baal that he set up there. I also want you to cut down the Asherah pole that's there. And then I want you to take that wood from the pole, build a fire, kill a bull, and sacrifice it on that fire. And then I want you to build an altar to me, because I am the one true God. So Gideon did exactly like the Lord said, sacrificing a bull and burning the bull as a sacrifice and building an altar to God. But Gideon still has doubts about if God is really with him. So he asked for a sign. He actually asked for two, and we're very familiar with this part of the story of Gideon. We remember he asked to put a wool fleece on the threshing floor, and in the morning there'll be dew on the fleece, but not on the ground. God does this. Well, he says, just let me ask you once again, if you just do one more thing for me. I want you to make the ground wet and leave the fleece dry. And again, God answers Gideon's request. So the angel tells Gideon, now I want you to go gather an army of people to go against the Midianites. And Gideon returns with 32,000 men. Through two processes, the Lord shrinks that army to 300 men to go against 135,000 Midianites. You know why the Lord did this? He said, if you have a big army, you all will trust in yourselves and your strength and not in mine. I want it to be my victory, not yours. So he gives him very unlikely weapons, and Gideon follows God's direction, and his men defeat the Midians, just like God had told him that he would do. Well, here's where we move into chapter 8, and this is where we were in my class when we went home to stay for a while. It's also when we see Gideon slowing down in the path of faith and being distracted by pride and personal vengeance. We see this mighty warrior becoming more interested in gaining glory for himself rather than giving glory to God. He actually starts acting like God instead of serving God. Well, after the battle, he has a dispute with the tribe of Ephraim because they felt like they hadn't been involved in the battle and they wanted to be. And then on top of that, he and his men, just 300 of them, they're starving, they're hungry. And but they want to continue. Gideon wants to continue to go on and defeat the two kings that came from Midian that they have not captured yet. So on their way, they come to a town called Succoth, and he asked the people for some bread, but they refused him. So he says, just for that, when I return in triumph, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars. He then stops in the city of Peniel and once again asks for bread for him and his troops. And again, the answer is no. So he tells them, when I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower of your town. Notice Gideon's words. When I return, I will tear down your flesh. When I return, I will tear down your tower. Gideon's become so overconfident and arrogant. He doesn't say, if the Lord wills, I will do such and such, but rather he boasts, I will do this, I will do that. When he captures the two kings, he does to the people just what he warned. He beats the people of Succoth with briars and thorns, tearing their flesh. He goes on to Peniel and tears down the tower, killing some of the people in the process. He then asked the two kings of Midian, what kind of men did you kill in Tabor? And they said, well, they were men that looked like you, sons of kings. Gideon said, you have killed my brothers, the sons of my mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you. Now, remember, God said, when you go into this battle, I want you to kill everyone. But here Gideon is taking over who he's going to kill and who he's not. Gideon then asked his young brother to kill the kings. He wants him to take part in his revenge. But he refuses because he's young. He doesn't want to kill anyone. So the kings taunt him, you're not very strong. If you are, you would kill us. So Gideon does kill the two kings. He takes the crescent ornaments off their camels. off the king's camels, which were a display of their royalty. So the Israelites say to Gideon, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the Midianites." Did you catch the second part of that sentence? Because you have saved us from the Midians. Israel gave God's glory to Gideon. Gideon chooses not to rule over them, yet he doesn't refute the credit for the battle. He did not give glory back to God. If you remember, God had shrunk Gideon's army down to 300 to show that the odds were so astronomical that there was no way a man could deliver them. But Gideon did not mention that God gave the victory. He says with his mouth he doesn't want to be their king, but he takes their money. He asks each of them to give an earring from the plunder. Does that sound like a familiar story we've heard? The Israelites at Mount Sinai wanting their own idol, and they melt down their jewelry and make a golden calf. All these were more symbols of a king's royalty. Gideon took the earrings and had an ephod made out of the gold and the jewels and placed them in Ophrah, his hometown. Now, an ephod was an apron that was made of gold and purple linens. It was a beautiful thing that was worn only by the high priest. There was 12 stones, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. There were also 2 other stones on the apron, the Urim and the Thummim, which were used to consult God on decisions. Some scholars say Gideon had the ephod placed in his town as a relic or a monument of his victories. Others say he wanted more glory for himself, seeking to be a priest over Israel as well as their judge. Scripture doesn't tell us exactly why he made the ephod, but it does tell us that all Israel themselves prostituted by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. Well, if my class is watching this video today, we finished the book of Gideon. We've finished the study. But more importantly, I think what God is saying to us here is he wants us to finish the race he's set before us. He wants us to start strong and end strong. And that's what he's asking us to do. Well, how in the world can we finish strong? I've just got a few ideas. Keep our eyes on Jesus. He's the author and perfecter of our faith. Practice the discipline of grace. Discipline produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Make every effort to live in peace with each other if possible. And invest in others. Reach out beyond the circle of our family, our church, and our friends. There's people out there that need a touch from us. And we are God's hands and feet. We are his witness. And above all, let us run the race that is set before us with perseverance, fixing our eyes on Christ. If we do this, we will finish well. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much for your word. I think you placed this very story in the Bible to speak to us about finishing our race, finishing well. And God, we're imperfect, just like the Israelites were. We make mistakes every day. But, oh God, you're so loving and patient and merciful with each of us. And God, we thank you and praise you for that. God, if there's not a person listening to me today that wouldn't say in their heart, Lord, I want to finish well. I want to finish this race well. I don't want it written down about me that I did so well in the beginning, and then I slowed down in my faith and my trust in you. Oh God, be with our church. Be with our new pastor. Help us all work together to finish the race well. Thank you.